Electricity Minister Dr Kgosientso Ramokgopa has briefed Cabinet on a plan to address the energy crisis. This comes as the country continues to be subjected to higher stages of load shedding. Just last month, the minister visited 18 power stations to assess their performance and the challenges. Let's make sense of what's been said so far and the way forward. Bring in Professor Sampson, Mamphweli, who is Director for the Center of Renewable and Sustainable Energy Studies at Stellenbosch University. Prof, great to see you as always. Thanks for making time to speak to us. I wonder if as a start we can just begin by ventilating some of the issues in that raging debate about what to do with the country's coal-powered power stations, I beg your pardon, the ones that are meant to be decommissioned, we're told. So on the one hand, of course, we need to respond to the climate crisis, as is the case for the globe. But on the other, we have very unique energy constraints, and keeping some of those power stations, we're told, may help us alleviate the worst-case scenario. How should we navigate these competing interests, do you think?
Good morning, Ayanda and the viewers. Just a small correction. I've now moved on from Stellenbosch University. I'm with Sanedi. I'm the head of the DSI and Secretariat there. Coming to the question that you have asked, for me, we are starting to have a side kind of a show or a side kind of a debate. The extension of the life of the coal fleet is a debate that we may have to have it in the future, but not now. What we need to do at the moment is to fix the coal fleet that is failing, is to ensure that the 6 power stations that are giving us problems are working optimally. Basically, we need to fix that the coal fleet and ensure that the coal fleet sits at above 70% energy availability factor. Then we can start talking about extension of the life of the coal fleet only if we, after implementation of the Energy Action Plan, which is the President's plan, then we project that we won't have adequacy. And that work is being done currently by NECOM, the Energy Crisis Committee. The Department of Mineral Resources and Energy is also busy revising the Integrated Resource Plan. So after all that work is done, we will be able to know whether we will have adequate energy supply or whether we need to extend the life of some of the coal fleet. If you look at some of the coal power stations that are being mentioned, Camden and others, those power stations are only going to have to be decommissioned in around about 2025. And if you look at the Energy Action Plan, by then we should be sitting at above 70% energy availability factor, and we should be having a lot of new generation capacity on the cards or already operating. So we could be talking about something that is basically futile, something that we shouldn't be even considering at this point in time, in my view. But it's good that such kind of conversations happen while the IRP is being revised.
Not to be cynical at all, Prof, but we're dealing with a crisis here that's been a decade in the making. Are you really confident that come 2025, the current plans in place, many of them, many people might say are not new, will be realized?
It's yes, we're dealing with a crisis that's long coming. There has never been a situation where there was a proper plan to address load shedding, focusing specifically on load shedding, until President Ramaphosa announced the Energy Action Plan in July last year. Now, if you look at some of the interventions that government took after the announcement of the Energy Action Plan in July, some of them are starting to bear fruit in terms of projects on the pipeline. For instance, the president removed the licensing requirements for IPP projects, and with that, we have got about close to 3,000 megawatts that has been registered with NERSA. In the past 35 or so days, we've seen about 1,400 megawatts or so being registered with NERSA. Those megawatts are going to come live in the next, 18 to 24 months, depending on when they reach financial close. There is quite a number of other initiatives that need to be taken into consideration. The fixing of the coal fleet, for me, is the biggest challenge that we still face. I must indicate, though, that I've seen the cabinet statement. They've referred the initiatives back to NECOM, the Energy Crisis Committee, so that it can be evidence-based. I believe it was not yet evidence-based. And if you look at the work that NECOM has done, my only problem is to ask the question, where will the money to fix the coal fleet come from? Because that is where we need to start. And even after fixing this coal fleet, let's take Camden, for instance, 2,000 megawatts, 47 years old. Not properly maintained in the past. At the moment, it's still working fine. We don't know what will happen in the next a year or so with this coal fleet. So we are not even guaranteed that this coal fleet will work properly after we extended the life and after being renewed, because it's the fleet that's giving us problems. So why should we then start to talk about things that have not been researched? We must first do our research, and then after thorough analysis of this coal fleet, we can come back and then start talking about life extension. By the way, life extension is not a problem as long as it's properly communicated to the international community, right, in line with our climate goals.
That's exactly where I was hoping to go. And to help us, I suppose, ventilate some of those policy concerns, let's bring in Sahlulele Luzipo, who's the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Mineral Resources and Energy. He also joins us via our telephone line. Great to have you hop onto the program, sir. Thanks for making time. So what the Prof just said is exactly what I was hoping to engage you on, right? Policy certainty around whatever decision is ultimately made about the decommissioning of our coal fleet. I'm sure you're also aware of this raging debate. On the one hand, we need the extra capacity in order to make it out of load shedding as quickly as we'd like to. On the other hand, there are these imperatives around our just energy transition and responding to the climate crisis. As the back and forth continues, the international community and some of our traders are watching. How confident are you that we're able to communicate a clear message about whatever decision we ultimately take?
No, good morning to you and the viewership and the guest in studio. I think the first thing that is quite critical is that I may not be competent enough in terms of where I'm located because mainly it is about policy as far as energy is concerned, including electricity. But to answer your question is that I think we should not create that issues of climate compliance are a contradiction to energy sustainability and energy supply. I think it's a question of a balance between the two. And in my view, one of the critical issues is that as we continue to make sure that we comply with our international commitment as far as climate demands are concerned, we also have to take into cognizance that each country has to take into cognizance its developmental objectives. And I don't think we should create an impression that therefore climate compliance is contradictory or is in competition with a developmental objective. And one of those critical issues is the issue of the energy crisis, especially electricity in the South African context. And I think that balance is very critical. That is why we call it anyway just energy transition. We have to take into cognizance all the demands that have to be put into place so that we once we comply with climate demands or we move towards owning up to our international commitment, at the same time we also have a responsibility to ensure that our developmental objectives, especially the issue of energy sustainability and energy supply, is also a matter that is taken into cognizance of.
Yeah. There's obviously also questions, Prof, around who's going to fund all of this, even if we go down the route, of course, of seeing through the energy action plan in its current form. I mean, government telling us here on the channel yesterday that for all intents and purposes, this plan itself is taking shape. Should we be worried about where this money is coming from? Because we also know about that saying of there'd be no thing as a free lunch, as an example.
Yeah, in terms of the just energy transition, the developed countries have got an obligation towards the developing countries to assist with funding. There is what we call the green finance that has been talked about out there. We already know about the 8-point-something billion rand, which is a drop in the ocean, by the way. The 8-point-something billion US dollars that has been pledged so far by the developed countries, America and Germany and others. So the green finance part needs to come into play in terms of funding the just energy transition. My view is that we made a slight mistake as a country when we did, and I saw the appropriation bill being tabled in Parliament and all that. When the Minister of Finance made the 250-something billion available to service the Eskom debt, a portion of that money should have been made available as equity injection into Eskom so that they can then be able to fix the coal fleet. And I agree with my counterpart there. To say we need to consider issues around adequacy when we plan our just energy transition. And the Integrated Resource Plan 2019 has got a very good provision for that. When we modeled the Integrated Resource Plan, we took into consideration the issue of adequacy, to say we will have adequate supply of electricity as we bring in new generation capacity, and we will be able to decommission some of the coal power stations and be able to meet our climate goals. The problem that we have at the moment is the fact that we delayed in terms of bringing in new generation capacity.
Right.
That's why we're sitting in this particular conundrum. But I must commend Minister Mantashe. He has been doing very well in terms of playing the catch-up since the revision of the IRP 2010. What he needs to do is to continue with the pace that he has been moving in terms of bringing in new generation capacity. And if that continues in the next 2 years or so, we shouldn't be sitting in an energy crisis, in my view.
I wonder if that will actually take place, given, I suppose, the many disappointments, let's call them, along the way. But Mr. Luzipo, let me give you the last bite of the cherry. We know that Cabinet is currently mulling over what to do next, and I imagine it's going to be this issue among several others that they're going to debate in order to at least give the kind of certainty I imagine Parliament needs in order to do their work to end load shedding. What are you hoping you'll hear from Parliament, from Cabinet, once they're done with their deliberations?
I think the most critical thing, I must say, unfortunately, I'm not in the executive, but the most critical thing for me is the fact that there is certainty on what are the challenges. For an example, one of the issues we have had an issue with was the fact that there was a denial that in terms of the base load requirements, there is a problem in terms of the turnaround plan for the power utility, which is Eskom. I think for me, the first thing that is a sign of promise is the fact that we have had the Minister of Electricity who has gone down and addressed two critical issues. First, find what is the problem and how do you do that. And it has been clear that one of the critical issues is to make sure that we put Eskom back to where it is supposed to be. Secondly is the question of the morale of the employees, because they are very critical. Those are the people that at the end of the day will require them to address the current crisis that we are in now. So I think that for me, that for me is a promising step that says that we know what we are addressing. So that when you look at the other alternative sources, we see them as additional to what we are trying to address at the end of the day. And I hope that finally, with that experience that has been there, yes, I hear Prof what he says in terms of research, making sure that, but I always say the best research that could have is to be certain of what you are dealing with. And I think at this stage, we all understand now that the first thing that we have to address is to make sure that we improve in terms of our maintenance strategy of the power utility, and therefore look at gradually how do we bring in, because the question of alternative energy I always argue and say it doesn't mean if, for instance, you put additional capacity as far as energy is concerned, that will come into effect by tomorrow. It will also take its own time, and therefore it may take 2 years or 1.5 years. But I think it's critical that there is certainty on what we are dealing with now.
Sahlulele Luzipo is the chairperson of the Mineral Resources and Energy Portfolio. Also joining us there is Professor Sampson Mamphweli, our resident energy analyst. To both our guests, thanks very much indeed for your time.